Hey, y'all. I'm Sam Ford, media innovation consultant based here in Kentucky in Bowling Green, and have the pleasure today to be speaking with someone who needs no introduction, Dana Canedy, who is going to be talking with us about her life and career, her book, A Journal for Jordan, and the adaptation to film that is coming out imminently in screens around the country and around the world, and in your home as well, in this strange world we're living in. Dana, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
All right. Well, it's as you all can see from my background, it's an interesting time here in Kentucky with tornadoes having come through all of Western Kentucky. Our Bowling Green, where I'm based, got hit pretty hard. My family's fortunate enough to be in good shape. We're without electricity, so I'm joining you from somewhere in rural Barron County today. Dana, for all your friends and family in Kentucky, everyone okay?
They are, and I'm so glad you brought this up because there was no way I was going to start this interview without first expressing my heartfelt condolences to everyone who lost and suffered from these tornadoes. I've been thinking about y'all throughout Kentucky ever since it happened, and I want you to know that I'm incredibly sorry. Kentucky's a resilient state, as we all know, and I know everybody's pulling together there, but I'm not there with you personally, but I'm thinking about y'all every day and praying.
Well, very much appreciate it. And as you say, I think we'll see Kentuckians already have neighbors helping neighbors, pitching in, working together.
That's what Kentuckians do.
Absolutely. From the line workers to the National Guard to all other folks from all parts of life kind of jumping in and helping. And so I appreciate that, Dana. But for the reason we're gathered here today, I sound like a evangelical, want to talk about this great story that you were bravely willing to share in book form, and then working with such a great team to bring that to the screen. So how did this film adaptation of your book come to be? How did this all get started?
Well, when my Charles died in the war in Iraq in 2006, we had just had our son Jordan. He was 6 months old, and I needed something to do with my grief. I was a journalist at the New York Times then, and I really thought I was going to lose my mind if I couldn't figure out some way to channel all of this pain. And so I decided to write about it first on the front page of the New York Times, because I wanted Americans to feel viscerally what it was like when you get that knock at the door, you open it up, and there are those military officials standing there. They don't need to say anything. You know why they're there. I also wanted to make sure that I protected Charles's legacy, because he wrote a 200-page journal to our son from the war zone. And I thought, how special and unique is this? And I wanted people to understand and know about his heroism and his dedication to country. And also I wanted to make sure that my son knew about his dad. So the article then led to a book. In that process, a wonderful man by the name of Todd Black, an executive producer in Hollywood, who's friends with Denzel and has been working with him for over 25 years, got in touch with Denzel Washington, told him about us, and Denzel called me. And we spoke a bit, and I said, listen, the only thing I care about is that you understand that there is a real Jordan behind this story. And Jordan was 3 at the time, and he invited us, Denzel did, to the set of one of his movies where he was shooting. And, he, in between scenes, he carried Jordan around the set. He talked to him, he talked to me. We went to dinner that night, he read the journal, and we've been friends ever since. And he decided that he wanted to make this into a movie. In fact, Denzel has said repeatedly over the last few months, including in a bunch of interviews we've been doing together this week, and I can't believe it every time he sees it, says it, I'm deeply touched. He said that this is the most important thing he's done in his entire career, that everything he has done as an actor, producer, and director was to lead him to this moment. And that just touches me deeply. And I know it would touch my Charles as well.
Absolutely. What considering what a storied career he's had, that's quite a statement. And were you all, I'm sure like many of us, had watched plenty of those Denzel performances over the years. So yeah,
I hadn't actually watched much. And he's like, do you know about my movies? You watch my movies? So one weekend it was storming, and Jordan and I on the weekends often have movie marathons at home. And I was like, Jordan, we got to watch Uncle D's movies. We can't, you know, we have to do, we need to watch these movies. And they were unbelievable, of course, but we had to do a little homework.
That's a good deal. And what impresses me from that story as well is the homework that Denzel did from the very beginning in terms of sitting down with this journal, and for you to know such a emotionally charged story that he was going to handle this seriously and with care.
Yes, yes. He made that known from the very beginning. And I think one of the reasons that the performances are so powerful is because it became personal to him. And he made sure that he brought all the right people to the project. I remember one time he called me up, he was going through the script and he was very emotional. And I said, D, what's going on? And he said, I just, I'm so moved by this. And I said, it's because you now know us as people. We're not just characters on a page. And I said, just remember, Charles was a person as well. And he's carried that. And he just made sure that in the performances and everything he did around this, that we kept at the center of it, that there was a little boy who lost his father, a woman, me, who lost the love of my life, and a man who gave everything he had to give for our country.
Well, speaking of great talent that's been brought into the project, what was the process like working with Virgil Williams as the screenplay was being developed?
It was incredible. He came to New York, spent a lot of time with us, with Jordan, with me, with my mother. And I'll never forget, for 3.5 years, I ran the Pulitzer Prizes after I left the New York Times. And the first year that I announced the winners of the Pulitzers, got a lot of attention for two reasons. One, because we gave an award in music to Kendrick Lamar, which is a highly unusual choice, but also it was the first time that a woman and a person of color was running the Pulitzers. And so there was a lot of press. What people didn't see behind the scenes is the entire next day I was sitting in my office with Virgil. I would do an interview and then we would stop and go through a few pages of the script. And then I would do another one. This went on for 8 hours. There were times we were crying, times we were laughing. I'd have to say, okay, I have to take a break. I've got to do another interview. And we went page by page by page through the outline of the script. And so that's how deeply involved I was.
I can only imagine the emotions of that moment and in general. But speaking of emotions, this film came together in the midst of myriad crises and tumult in our country. The COVID-19 pandemic, which complicated, I'm sure, every aspect of filmmaking for this thing. The racial reckoning happening across the U.S.,
yes,
driven by events like the death of Breonna Taylor here in Kentucky. Your own switch in career from running the Pulitzers to becoming the first publisher of color in the history of the Simon & Schuster imprint. How did all those changes in the world and in your own life shape the process of making this film?
I think certainly for Denzel and absolutely for me, it made us even more aware of the importance of what we were doing and our dedication to it. Because the universal themes that come through in this movie of patriotism and honor and dignity, I think will unite us. I really do. Like, we have more in common than we have that separates us and that makes us different. And I think this movie is a reflection of that. When you see Charles with his soldiers in this film, you see warriors. You don't see white warriors or black warriors or Asian warriors or Hispanic warriors. You see warriors. And it's a good reminder that, when men and women are in battle, they're not asking what color the person next to them trying to save them or battle on with them is. They want to know, are we going to get home together to our families? And so I think this movie is a good reminder that we have people of all kinds willing to die to protect our Constitution, protect our right to disagree with each other, protect our rights to love each other. And so that I was focused on that quite a bit. And I kept thinking as we were going, wow, we got to get this movie out here because it's going to remind Americans that we are the United States. And if we're not, then we should change our name.
So very, very good way of looking at it, and certainly resonates here in Kentucky right now, as our communities are doing that resilient work that comes next after the tornado. The tornado hit all of us equally, and
That's right,
you
Sam.
know, and Bowling Green, for all the international communities that are there, refugee communities, were some of the parts of town hardest hit, and see folks come together as a reminder. How do we band together? United we stand, divided we fall.
That's exactly right, Sam. I've been thinking about it a lot because as we've been screening the movie across the country and in places like Kentucky, I'm getting hugs from everybody. So is Jordan, and women are saying, oh my gosh, I see myself in that story, or my husband's like that. And it's white women, Black women, it doesn't matter. And that's a beautiful thing. That's really who we are at our best.
Yeah, and I think with all we've been through collectively in our country, but really the world with this pandemic, how do we be that best version of ourselves is really the work that we have ahead of us.
Yes.
So speaking of the pandemic, what was the shooting process itself like, and how were you and the family involved in the actual making of the film? Because I'm sure the health situation we've all been in has complicated that process.
Yes.
How it
Yes.
would be happening normally.
So I was deeply involved. I'm a producer on the film. But Sony Pictures had an incredible COVID protocol in place. And so we were tested. Anytime we were going to set, we were tested 72 hours before, 24 hours before, and the day of. The cast and crew and director were tested every day. There was a bubble, they couldn't leave. So we felt like, and this was before folks were vaccinated. And so we felt like we were pretty well protected. And then somehow, this is how, as I said to you, the cast and crew and Denzel made this personal. Somehow during the middle of that, when no one was gathering and few people were traveling, Denzel managed to have a birthday party for Jordan's 15th birthday on the set. And it was incredible. We have these food trucks in New York. They hired a gourmet grilled cheese food truck, a second truck that had, these big, huge trucks. The second one had nothing but desserts in them. Plus they had a big sheet cake. We watched, our family came from Kentucky. We watched shooting for the afternoon and evening, ate, laughed a little bit. And then Denzel gave Jordan his director chair as a gift for his birthday.
It's fantastic.
I don't think I'm ever going to be able to top that, Sam.
No, he made it a little difficult. That's a tough one. Well, speaking of shooting, a tremendous cast came together for this film. Michael B. Jordan's been a favorite of mine since his early days on The Wire and Friday Night Lights, both two of my favorite series of all time. And the incomparable Tamara Tooney, who her pioneering work, I'm a soap opera fan. I grew up watching As the World Turns, and the daytime television landscape depicting Midwestern life was far too white when she came on the scene in the 80s and really told important stories that a lot of those audiences, like my grandma who grew up watching her stories, hadn't really heard. And
that's incredible.
But so many others. What was it like watching these actors bring this story from your own life to the screen? How does it feel? It's not just something you wrote, but something so intensely personal being brought to life. Denzel kind of commented on this as well. It sounds like, to start to see this become real in a way that brings it to such a wide audience.
Well, the great thing is that I didn't meet any of them for the first time on set. By the time we were on set, I talked to them a bunch of times. They'd ask a lot of questions. Shantae Adams, this amazing young woman who plays me, this actress, she's classically trained. She won a Sundance Award for some early work she did. We will all be saying we knew her when. She's the next big actress in Hollywood. She's unbelievable. She spent a lot of time with me, as did Denzel, all of them really. And so by the time I met them, they feel like they knew me, and I felt as though I knew them. One day on set, Michael was going to be shooting some scenes as Jordan's father, when he'd come home from the war to meet him for 2 weeks. He'd shooting those scenes. And I brought a duffel bag that included Charles's dog tags, his Purple Heart, the actual physical journal, and the outfit that Jordan wore to his dad's funeral. And Mike had to walk away for a minute and gather himself, and then he wore the dog tags that day for shooting. And that's how real it was to all of them. And you see that in the performances that they gave.
Well, to back up, as you described earlier, first turning the journal and the story of your family and what you all went through into a book, such an intensely personal journey as compared to your work as a journalist, telling the stories of other people. What was that process like, kind of comparing the reporting you'd done into the lives of others to then doing a project like this journal that brought your own life to people's pages?
I was on a mission. I was on a mission to find out everything I could, to use my reporting skills to find out everything I could about what happened to him. Not just the sanitized 30-second version of the events that you get when the military officers come to your house. They don't know anything. They're just trying to get there quickly to inform you. It's not their fault, but they want you to know about it officially before word starts seeping out. So they don't have a lot of details. They come to your house to collect information more than to get information. You know, there are certain things they needed, his birth certificate, my son's, and all of that. But they were walking into the living room of a journalist, and I started peppering them with questions that they didn't have the answers for. So one of the things I wanted to do is really report it out, if you will, so I could figure out what happened. But also, I literally was the only national reporter journalist at the time who had that experience, and I wanted people to understand this is what happens, you know, when a soldier goes off to war. Their death affects the whole family. It's not, so that was important to me. And I think in the end, writing about this became a way for me to create some closure for myself, but also to share something that was not just about me, that was universal with the New York Times readers, the readers of my book, and now audiences.
Well, from all that I've seen and heard, and I'm looking forward to seeing the film myself, I think that, this has the potential to impact a lot of people, and to your point, with a message that we all need to hear and constantly remind ourselves of right now.
I hope so, Sam. I really do. I feel like God has been at work in every part of this process. Denzel started shooting on many of the scenes in prayer with the cast. He and I have talked about the power of God and using us to tell this story, and that's what it's about for us.
Well, I have a few more questions for you, not directly related to the film, but
sure.
While we have you here, for anyone watching this who has considered publishing a book, and especially telling the story of their own experiences, emotional journey, many of the authors I've talked to who've written books that are based on their own life experiences were surprised at the emotional toll that process can take on you at parts along the way. What would you share with folks from what you learned from navigating the publishing process as a first-time author, and as well navigating the introspective process of doing such a personal process like writing this book?
Sure. So the decision is not whether you're going to include sensitive information or not. It's whether you're going to do the book at all. Because if you're going to write about your life, you got to bleed on the page. Adults are smart, and they know if you're hiding information or you're not going as deeply as you should be. So if you're going to write, you got to put it out there. You've got to provide context. No one lives a charmed life. And so people need to see the nuances of your characters, your personality, your story, all of that. So I would say that's the first thing. The second thing is be objective about what you have. There are some stories that are interesting, but may not have a big audience or readership, and others just demand to be told, and be realistic about the difference. And then when you do have a story you want to tell, make sure you find some professional readers to go through it with you. I hired an editor from the New York Times to read my manuscript before I turned it into my editor. become my actual publishing editor, because I wanted to make sure that I was on the right page, and that I took a step back and was really looking objectively about what I was saying, and so it's a process, and everybody has to find their own process when they're writing a book.
Well, now you've gained perspective on the publishing industry as a publisher amidst a time of significant change in that industry. I was actually working for Simon & Schuster remotely, mind you, from here in Kentucky. So unfortunately, we didn't have a chance to meet in the S&S Inner Sanctum in person. But when you came into the company in 2020, the parent company had announced that it was for sale. With the pandemic, S&S was suddenly adapting to life working remotely in a very in-person company and industry. The industry was dealing with retail and supply chain challenges, and we were all reeling from the death of CEO Carolyn Reedy.
Carolyn Reedy, rest her soul.
A force in the publishing industry, as the only female CEO of a Big Five publisher, and just one of my favorite people. But what was it like coming into this industry and this position at such a tumultuous moment?
I took it one day at a time. I knew I was prepared. I had the experience, and the training through University of Kentucky, starting there at the journalism school. I had the training to know good storytelling, and my 23 years at the New York Times certainly prepared me, particularly since I left in a leadership role there and then running the Pulitzer Prizes. I knew how to run a team, and I took it one day at a time. I knew that my goals had to be modified a bit because of just some of the factors that you mentioned. So my number one goal is to figure out how to get to know my staff when I was only going to be seeing them over Zoom. I've still only met probably a third of the staff in person, because we're still mostly working from home. And so to acclimate the staff to a new boss, make sure they understood my vision, that I understood what was important to them, what motivated them. That was my number one challenge. And then to acquire some big books right away, and to make sure that my team felt supported, and then they knew I took their goals and their careers very seriously as well. So I focused a lot on that in the first year, and it worked out really well.
Well, speaking of what you've learned in this kind of unconventional way to enter a new industry and position, what are a couple of things that you've learned about the publishing industry on the publisher side that you didn't know or understand completely when you were an author?
I think one of the things is you sort of see up close how the sausage is made, budgeting and marketing and publicity and so forth. And so, being deeply immersed in that has been fascinating. My favorite meeting is the book cover meeting, where I approve the covers of the books. I always tell the team that it feels like we're wrapping Christmas presents every day when we're in those meetings. I've learned a lot about the nuance, the subtleties of designing book covers. That's been fun. That's for me, that's, other than supporting the staff and promoting our authors, I have the most fun working on the book covers and approving first the concepts, and then, what they bring to me to show me for final approval.
There's so many talented professionals in that company, and as you get deep into the nuances of supply chain and distribution chain management, especially in the midst of a pandemic, it's just it's awe-inspiring anytime you enter a new industry and realize just the amount of work and expertise it takes to bring a book into a reader's hands.
That's exactly right.
Or reporting from on the ground into the hands of folks.
Yeah, the key to that for me has been promoting and hiring really good people to work with me. I promoted someone to be associate publisher who was just this fireball, who is sort of a master at book pricing and production quality and all the things that we need to do on the less creative side of the business to make sure that we position our books for success. And so, I knew right away that the thing I needed to do is to really make sure I was surrounded by the right leadership team. And I have a great one.
Well, you mentioned some of the things that kind of remain the same from a career in journalism to a career in publishing, recruiting and hiring and retaining and promoting good people and finding great ways for a team to work together. What are some of the differences between tackling some similar issues as a publisher as you did in your time in newsrooms?
There's actually not much difference at all. It actually doesn't matter whether you are, working in a soda making factory or a book publishing company or on a farm. It's really about motivating the people that you hire, inspiring them, having them really buy into your vision for whatever it is you're doing, and leading from the front, meaning, being willing to roll up your sleeves and doing the work, making sure that your vision is very clear. And I think good leadership, uh, um, it doesn't really matter what industry you're in. It doesn't depend on that. There's a difference between good management and good leadership. Good management is folks who think about their particular departments or their role. Good leadership is thinking about the entire company in totality. And I'm blessed that I have a great leadership team around me.
Well, we've talked about how you built your career in newsrooms, starting with experiences here in Kentucky. Kentucky's seen many impactful African-American women enter the journalism profession. Folks like yourself and Nikita Stewart at the Washington Post done such great work in the past several years from afar, but here in the state too, Renee Shaw at KET, Ashley Clark at Louisville Public Media, Alana Watson at WKU Public Radio.
Dawn G, of course.
Yeah. And Jaleesa Chapman, who's the youngest member of iHeartRadio's National Black Information Network reporting team from Louisville. I was one of my mentors in J School at WKU was the National Association of Black Journalists Hall of Famer, Dr. Pam Johnson, who was the first African-American woman to serve as publisher of a general circulation newspaper and then shape the lives of so many at the helm of a J School. What would you say to girls of color here in Kentucky about why journalism or publishing might be a career option for them, and what can they do to help shape this profession and the communities on which they report or cover in roles like the ones you've been in?
Thank you. That's an important question. I think what I'd primarily say is that it's important that we have people who look like us to help shape what stories get told and how they get told. You have to have a diverse range of thoughts, opinions, to be able to put the best information out there. And by that, I mean, whether it's people from Appalachia, folks who are religious, ethnic and racial diversity. I just think life would be so incredibly boring if we all thought and looked the same way, right? It's not realistic to think that you could put the best journalism or the best books into the world through only one lens. And so if there are students who are interested in this profession, I think that there's a big public service to be done by getting in there and influencing how history gets told.
Well, speaking of your beginnings in Kentucky and the early stages of your career, what are some of the ways your Kentucky roots have shaped the journey you've taken in your career and the person that you've become and are still becoming?
Well, it starts and ends in Kentucky. Honestly, I had the best, first of all, training in high school. My education, I should say, my English teacher and others saw early on that I was a serious student, not an A student, but a serious student in terms of loving writing and reading and so forth, and encouraged me. My parents did as well. My father had an incredibly strong work ethic, and I learned that early. My mother read everything that I wrote, even poems when I was 12 years old and short stories. And so there was that encouragement all along. And then when I went to the University of Kentucky, I mean, UK has one of the best J schools in the country. And so I got a top-notch education, did a bunch of internships, which is key, any students out there, internships. And the first two, I called the local papers and said, I'll work for free. but my resume didn't say free intern, it said intern. And so I gained a lot of experience. And so Kentucky prepared me on so many levels for everything that followed.
Well, what about the what's next? As this film comes out, as you're embarking knee deep in a lot of important projects with Simon and Schuster imprint, as you looked at what Jordan has ahead for him, what do you have your eye on in 2022 and beyond?
Well, thank you. The what's next for me is I want to relax a little bit. I've, working on the movie, and as publisher, I've been trying to juggle doing 2 full-time jobs at once while also making time for my son. And so, for example, a few weeks ago, I was in Atlanta working on some things with Shantae and Michael. And then I had to fly to LA to be with Dee for some promotional things we had to do there. Woke up the next morning in the hotel, 5 a.m. LA time, so that I could be on Zoom parent-teacher conference calls at 8 in New York, and then went into a meeting with my CEO, with my direct reports, got on a plane and read manuscripts on the way home. And so it's been pretty intense. It's all a blessing. Not, but I'd like to spend some time to reflect on what God might want me to do next, because anything I do with my career, I want to be in service to him going forward for the rest of my life. I'd love for that to involve some speaking. It'll probably involve other books. For Jordan, he's my reason for being. He's smarter than I am. He's kinder than I am. He's funnier than I am. He's wiser. And that's what you want, for a child. And so, we'll start looking at colleges next year. He's 15 in the 10th grade. And I just want to support him wherever his life is meant to take him.
Well, I can't wait to see and hear where that might be. Thanks so much for spending the time with us. It's been a pleasure to have a chat with you. I know you've got a lot of interviews and conversations and appearances to come as you prepare for this film to come out. But it was great spending some time talking about the Kentucky piece of your story and to be part of this screening that you were able to, and Sony were able to offer back to folks back home through Kentucky.
Well, Sam, thank you. I appreciate your time. I will tell you, I've done probably, we did a press junket the last few days. I've probably done 50 interviews. And I will say, and I'm not one who says things I don't mean. This is one of the best interviews I've done. You're incredibly thorough.
Well,
and
I appreciate
that. Thank you also. I have to say this as a white man from Kentucky, really getting, without me having to bring it up, the importance of diversity and the references that you made. I appreciate that. And I want to say one last thing is, it's so funny to me that this gives me hope. We're at a moment in our country where in almost all the interviews I do, race doesn't come up. Isn't that great?
It is.
We're proud that we're an African-American family, but I'm even more proud that we're an American family and that people are receiving our movie that way.
Absolutely. Well, I appreciate it, Dana, and best of luck with everything you've got to come. I hope you get a little bit of rest and relaxation during the holidays, but with the way you've stacked this thing up, I don't know how much hope.
Thank you, Sam, and happy holidays to you.
All right. Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Yo, cry.